Hello everyone, this is Spin Me Off podcast powered by ETH Entrepreneur Club. I'm its host Mark Jaworski, and today we are happy to welcome an amazing guest, Arnout Devos, who is the academic program manager and lecturer at ETH AI Center at ETH Zurich. Hi Arnout.
Hi Mark, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's great to be here. And thanks for you and the ETH Entrepreneur Club for organizing this.
I know that you have had quite a dynamic background. You've been to academia, then industry, then venture capital and investments, and then back to academia. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do?
Yeah, sure. My name is Arnout Devos. I'm a lecturer and also program manager at the ETH AI Center, where I'm actually the academic program manager overseeing research in education. I grew up in Belgium, where I'm originally from. I studied electrical engineering and computer science there, as well as management, and then I actually did a short stint in the United States, in Los Angeles, to get a master's in computer science. And after that, I made the transition to AI research, actually. I joined EPFL, the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne, where I was part of an entrepreneurial PhD program that they launched back then. And there I was mainly focusing on few-shot learning and meta-learning. This was back in 2018, so part of the deep learning boom and still a bit before the generative AI boom that we find ourselves in. Then also during that time, as part of the program, I worked at Amazon and Spotify, which was a great experience to get more industry experience. And also I bootstrapped a small startup that basically delivered course forms for university courses, which then professors bought. That was my first revenue. That was a great experience. And that actually led me to engage more with the entrepreneurial community at EPFL of students and staff. And actually then from that, we created this student fund, the student VC fund, together with some experienced entrepreneurs and VCs. It's called S2S Ventures, Students to Students Ventures. And we were part of the first cohort and really built this out to a fund at scale. That was an amazing experience. From that, we also built out the Science Entrepreneurship Summer School. And then after finishing a PhD at EPFL, I joined ETH Zurich, ETH AI Center specifically, in the current role that I'm in.
That's very unusual. You have started your career path in an academic environment. So you did your PhD at EPFL, then you moved to industry, then you moved to venture capital and investments, and then you came back to academia. Can you share us a little bit like how it all went? What experience did you get, and what motivated you to make these life changes?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a career zigzag, so to say, but I feel very fortunate that I was able to sample from all these different environments and also build experience and exposure in them, basically grasp also all the good parts and all the bad parts and what can be improved. And I think academia was it's always a starting point. So for many people, it's the first thing they do out of high school. But then I was also attracted to maybe build something of my own, also more in a business sense. So the previous projects were very much hacking projects. But then, for example, this course forum that I really sold to professors, that was the first experience with really generating small revenue and also closing the loop, so to say. And that actually then led to this fund, which is really about investing, basically closing the gap for early stage startups that have a big funding need. So myself, I bootstrapped, I didn't raise funding. But many startups struggle with not having some kind of income or resources to do marketing and other basic things. And that's what we really wanted to provide with this fund. And I think we largely succeeded in that. Also, the people running this fund is a huge community that I stay closely connected to. And that's, I think, also immensely valuable. So all those things, to me, they work together and they enabled me to sample both from academia, industry, entrepreneurship, and really give me a good setup to really excel in whatever I'm doing.
It's really fascinating that you had this chance to talk with different people in different domains. I mean, academia, investment research. Maybe you had a chance also to acquire some habits or traits of those people, and maybe you can share some mental frameworks. How do they work? What do they think about? What is important for them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so here there's various mental frameworks that I learned throughout my journey. For example, from working in big tech, so Amazon and Spotify, basically there it's all about scale and systems thinking. Like the impact you have is across millions of users at a time, whether the project is more, let's say, R&D driven or really at scale running on the Spotify, for example, the recommendation engine. And there, basically, you learn to move fast, but generally, usually, you don't really own the direction too much. It's set on a higher level, and it's already a mission you buy into. There's much less to shape, as much as things need to still innovate. And then to a bit as a counter example, academia, you really have deep freedom to explore fundamental questions, and I think it's also good that this exists in academia. Often, questions that are not necessarily economically relevant. I do think that knowledge creation is also value creation, in my opinion, and I do think it's a very necessary thing to have, especially to evolve and advance as a species. And I must say that also the best researchers I've met and also I've worked with, they combine this depth of thinking and exploring, also with an antenna for where the world is heading. So big societal problems. And that really tags in together well. And then the last thing is on the startup side. So basically, you own the problem end to end. For example, the Course Forum startup and all the other startups I've worked with through the student fund and also now my advisory roles. Basically, you own the problem end to end, and also you have scarce resources. And you need those scarce resources need extreme prioritization. And this at the same time is terrifying and also addictive because you learn to be very efficient and have a lot of impact, direct impact. The feedback loop is much shorter. And then basically across all these three mental frameworks, the common red thread or line in this is that basically to build things. You have people who prototype and ship. They always learn faster than the people who only theorize. And this applies both to industry, also academia, and a startup. It's all about iterating fast, prototyping. And so if, for example, you're a student now and you haven't built something outside your coursework, which is the theorizing part, then basically I recommend you to start as soon as possible.
I know that at ETH, we have a lot of spin-offs. A PhD student or a master's student working on their thesis, and at some point they decided, okay, we have enough value produced by our research, so we want to make a spin-off, we want to make a startup. At what point do you think do they have to change this perspective from purely academic to, okay, right now we are a startup and we have to think about like real products?
Yeah, so there it's a spectrum. Again, speaking with two words. By the way, the ETH AI Center also has an entrepreneurship team, and they really focus on supporting all these deep tech ventures. We also teach a course together with Alex Illich and Melanie Gabriel, technology entrepreneurship. How do you really build a technology venture? So technology-based ventures, because often the most valuable companies are coming from a technology-based approach, and they're the most scalable often, and that's really attractive to have massive impact, and also it's very investable and all those things. You want to see that whatever you're building ideally can impact as many people or as many, let's say, valuable things as possible. If you're only impacting cents in people's lives, then it's probably not that important of a problem to solve. But if you, for example, quantify it by time, if you can save people half an hour or 1 hour a day, that is often very valuable to people, whether that's in saving time, providing entertainment, or other things. That's a mental framework to have. And then for basically students or staff or founders to say like, okay, now is really the time to go. You never really know, but if you have a nudge that this can be hugely impactful, then you just have to make the leap and don't overthink it. And you also get signals from potential customers, potential investors, people around you, whether this is a good idea or not. And then you can really start to pivot. What's often very powerful is to find a co-founder. So to basically have at least one other person that you're able to convince that whatever you're doing is the right thing to do. Because it's very important to reason and discuss about this, and also align that it's not crazy what you're doing, and then just making the leap.
It's a very interesting thing that you have said that you should be getting signals from people. Yes, but I think you have to ask people first to get the signals, so that they will not come to you and advise.
I mean, actually, on that point, there is this very good book named a bit weirdly, but it's called The Mom Test. And there it really lays out the foundation. How do you talk to people to figure out what their problems are without pushing your solution to them? And that can really enable you. I mean, it's part of the customer discovery, customer development sometimes a bit. That can really enable you to see what problems do people have. And then it's up to you to see, okay, what solution do I have? Does it actually solve their problem? And you're not allowed to push your solution onto them, nor are they allowed to push what you should build on you either. So I think that's a pretty powerful framework to have.
Maybe the last question about the differences across academia, industry, and startups. From your experience or observations, what values or skills are the most wanted in each of these domains?
Depends a bit on, depends on the type. In academia, like really having a very curious mind, being also quite, quickly to grasp new concepts, exploring, those are really good characteristics to have. You can also test out these things by doing research projects, semester projects while a student. I deeply encourage this. I also did this myself while I was in undergrad, while I was in the US, while I was at EPFL. I mean, although there I was a full-time researcher, I really recommend to really explore this. And then in a startup, you need to be more something of everything, because at the earliest stage, it's just you and maybe a co-founder, and you really need to be very open to do many things. Also, sometimes things that are less exciting. However, they're often very necessary. For example, all the legal or fundraising things. At the end of the day, nobody gets out of bed to say, I love fundraising. You get out of bed because you want to impact lives, you want to solve problems. But it's a necessary part of building a venture, often a technology venture. And so doing those things and also becoming good at them is very important. And at the end of the day, you will see that they drive the objectives that you have forward, which is usually impacting the lives of people. And then in industry, it's a much more nuanced picture. They're much more at scale, many more people. So academia and startup is often more from a single person or small group of people point of view. Whereas in industry, you are in a super big team. This can also be highly valuable because you can really focus on specific things. But then also these companies need a lot of management and communication around that. So you have a whole backend and managerial stack that also is, let's say, unique to that setting. And I think all those skills really work together. And also, if you want to deliver massive impact, often, at least for the moment, you need to also have a bit of a scale as a company. Now, AI is turning around this whole paradigm that probably you can do a lot more with a lot less people. But that's a bit how I see the different aspects.
Do people really extensively use vibe coding when they do research?
Yes, they do, because often many research is a lot about transferring ideas into experiments and running those experiments. And especially, this was actually also one of my motivations to switch from more electrical engineering, more hardware. I was in analog circuit design to then more computer science, because the iteration loop is a lot shorter. And so also now with vibe coding, or you can call it agentic programming or whatever you want, this really enables to turn your thoughts into experiments and run them much faster than before you needed to really write the code yourself. Of course, you need to make sure that things are done correctly. So you still need the skill to understand and analyze. It's just that it amplifies and accelerates actually your idea to experimentation loop so much. And some even take it end to end, like AlphaFold, also Nobel Prize for chemistry, I think. That's really an example where AI really disrupts the chemical compound drug discovery creation pipeline. And I think that's an example and also a rightful Nobel Award. And that's also our hypothesis that in the future, especially with the interdisciplinary AI part, there will be much more discoveries at these intersections. And amplified by AI discovery or also AI supported coding and various other things as well.
And do you think we should use vibe coding more for ideation or exploring paper, or more focused on the writing some code like that you just have to do, but we can optimize this?
Yeah, I would say for both. Maybe I would recommend to use it in many places. Bottom line, what's important is that you still understand and are, let's say, a guardian of whatever you wrote. And there, for example, there's many challenges with respect to security, so that you make sure that whatever application you write and everything is still secure, and that at the end of the day, the burden is on you to make it secure. And that's not an easy task. And there you sometimes need experts. But otherwise, I would recommend anyone to use it anywhere. The thing is, often these coding agents at the moment write a lot of slop, so a lot of verbose code that maybe a real programmer would write more efficiently. Also, if it's with respect to treating sensitive or critical data like medical data or legal data, then I recommend really to still work with an expert at the moment, because if you vibe those things and you don't understand everything correctly or data is leaked, that can cause for very big problems.
I think that's a good time to start a discussion about your blog, about your blogging experience. I would say the main question right now is, do we still need it nowadays? Because if we can ask ChatGPT or Claude, why do we need to go to a personal website and read the text written by a human?
When we think about concepts in the brain and we translate that into the sounds we make, I do think that, for example, speaking about things or writing about things is equal to thinking, or at least it's a proxy of thinking. If you can't explain your work in a blog post, then also you don't understand it well enough. It's a bit like the quote: if you can teach something, then you understand it better. And also, I also see this in my own teaching. When you're teaching and there's updates in the literature or other places, reasoning about those things, it also updates your belief and you become smarter and more informed. I think that's massively useful. And also, one clear post about a project makes you findable. So basically, people who matter most for your career, like future collaborators, investors, hiring managers, they search over the internet, and basically this way you can make sure that they find you. And again, I do think AI is getting better and better at writing blog posts, but I think there's most value for the writer actually. And these days you can still tell these models need a lot of context and a lot of inputs. And often when it's written by AI, it's a bit woozy. It lacks the depth of what a human would write. I do think that for redacting and rewriting or restructuring, it's already proving a lot of value. So you can basically move from a bullet point structure to a fully written text. As much as that's still necessary, maybe we should communicate more in bullet points.
About it, you mentioned about trash propagation. Can you tell us a bit more about this and what does it mean?
Yeah, so on trash propagation, so these days there's more content than ever. And now it's also through AI, we have a lot of generative AI that is generating a lot of text. This was the initial boom in 2022 with ChatGPT and others. But now there's even more things coming up with things like Nano Banana, video, audio, 11 Labs, all kinds of stuff. And I do think that these evolutions are great. They provide for a much more diverse, again, this idea or thought to reality or interpretable thing. However, it also creates a lot more slop and the content online becomes a lot more questionable. I do think that it's almost a bit like a GAN, so a generative adversarial network. As there's more AI slop being generated, the discriminators will also learn along the way that there is more of this slop out there, and they will hopefully become more critical. This is not necessarily a good dynamic because you cannot really trust that things were written by humans as much as that is important. It's not always important. If it's about emotions or other things, maybe you would prefer to have that being voiced by a human rather than by a machine. The human also makes mistakes, so I do think that there's a bit of a content topical difference there. There will still be a lot of value for agencies and people that write honest content and that you can trust that they wrote it themselves. But I do think we'll move into a new world where people will be much more critical and probably assume anything is written by AI. And that's not necessarily bad, but that will create a new form of content criticism.
Can you tell us about your blogging experience and what do you think? Should other people also do blogging? If yes, then when?
Yeah, so I think so. Again, writing is thinking, and writing also enables you to expose your thinking to the world. So, for example, I'm a machine learning researcher, so I almost consider my papers to be blog posts as well, where basically these investigations, so to say, in certain aspects of the world, of the physics, of the way the world works, and then reporting on that. I think that's quite valuable. That's also why I value really technical blog posts or articles, be that papers or blog posts. And basically, I've added a number of articles, so published papers, also blogs on my blog. I don't do it as often as I would like to because it also takes time and time is limited. But I do think it's useful, and also for when people should start doing this. I think you should start blogging or writing about things as soon as you think you have something useful to say. Because if it's just adding to the noise, then it's not useful to anyone out there and probably also not to you. It's only useful to your own thinking process. And that can be valuable to you. But then to really publish it, I think it should be valuable to others. Otherwise, you're only adding to the noise. And sometimes I write about certain things I found interesting or bugs I found or other things. And then it can sometimes be valuable to other people. And to answer very specifically, I think people who are in university or building a company or have certain insights and that can be both professional and personal. I do think it's valuable to write about thousands and thousands of books have been written, prose that people enjoy, as well as technical manuscripts. I think it's never too early to start doing this, but then to really publish and also be consistent and really keep providing value. That's something that's a different ambition. And I do think it's good to keep it consistently going.
And in academic environment or in industry environment, the fact that you have a blog post, does it influence some things or it's just nice to have?
I want to say that actually it's often undervalued, for example, for academic researchers to be more vocal about their work. So something that with the publishing a paper, that's it and done. Now, often you also have to be very vocal about it to make sure that the world sees it. It's not always spotted. There's so many research works being published out there, and to get your work spotted, you really need to make it as easy as possible. Of course, if the work is not that good, then maybe it doesn't make sense. But of course, you want to do the best work. And so there, for example, making a small blog post, also posting on social media about it, I think it's highly valuable. And it's something that in Europe, for example, we're not doing enough. And for example, the communications colleagues at the ETH AI Center do an excellent job actually at making a lot of the AI research that ETH Zurich and our community is doing more visible. And also the various events I co-organize and other things we have, they're really making that more visible. And I think that's also part of this advertising dissemination, making it more visible. And I think that's valuable. And then in industry, so in academia, things are much more self-directed. It's much more open source as well. Whatever you're doing knowledge creation. As soon as a paper is out there on archive or published or talking about insights. Whereas in industry, there's the aspect of more intellectual property that is protected often. And so there it's a bit more tricky to talk about insights or learnings. It has to also be discussed often with your employer if it's fine if you talk about certain industry things. I think generally talking about your experience in a company, I hope positive. I think it's very, very good. But that's a bit more, the way I look at it, like academia and industry. Yeah. And also for startups, it can be quite a growth hack to blog about whatever they're doing, because then it really becomes visible to people what exactly they're doing, and if it might be useful to them, they might buy the product, join the company as a talent, or even become an investor, because then some startups also release manifestos that really shows that they have structured thinking and that they can really make a difference. Yeah.
To comment on this story, I remember on one of the events I was talking with a angel investor, and he recently did big investment in the company, and then he was talking oh my God, I invested in this startup, and now they are doing these posts on LinkedIn every single day. I've never seen so many posts in my life. So maybe this is another way how you can attract investors to fund your startup.
Yeah, so great to hear that the investor was impressed. So it's a trade-off, right? So being vocal about your work is important, but it's part of the overall thing. At the end of the day, I value highly prototyping, building, shipping. So that's really the most important part. And then disseminating about it, being vocal about it, is also an important part that's often not given enough attention. But then if it's fully focused on that, maybe they're not building enough. So as much as you can automate many things these days with AI, it's always good to find a balance there between building and talking about it. That actually brings us back to this thing of being a startup where you have to do everything. Often also in very small teams, even in academia and other places, you have to do everything. And that's let's say a challenging task, but it also teaches you a lot about how to be efficient and how to really make a difference.
On this point, do you want to talk about the network? Because I know that you have had a lot of experience with networking, talking with investors on both sides, and maybe you can share some things that you think are important about networking.
Having a lot of trust relationships with a lot of people, call it the network or whatever you want. So one advice I would give also is don't network, don't network for the sake of networking. But instead, if you solve problems for people before you need anything from them, that really builds this trust relationship that you are somebody who can make something happen. And that's then considered a network. Basically, this often, even for students, although they don't have that many professional engagements, they're studying still, for example, they can volunteer to organize something, a workshop, a reading group, a summit, some kind of event or another thing, or even do some work. And basically, because organizers, they meet everyone, they also build trust with others that they can really pull something off. And that's really valuable. And basically, next time somebody needs a collaborator, a hire, or a co-founder, then they think of the person who brought these other people together. So that's a very actionable point. There's also various clubs that you can join at ETH Zurich and other universities, right? The Entrepreneur Club is a great example how you have various initiatives like the Fuck Up Nights, InCube, other things that are also talked about, you're vocal, but you have actual people also doing things like putting the cube somewhere, organizing the venue. And I think that's highly valuable. And that's also how you build relationships with all the external actors that you're working with, but also the internal people that you co-organize this with. So, for example, in my professional life and personal life, we have many of these activities. So at the AI Center, we have, for example, a talk series where our faculty are hosting speakers, assistant professors or above level. We have various meetups that we have where people present posters. Also with our courses, we always try to be hands-on. So usually you're working in teams. I think also that's what I noticed as a difference between ETH Zurich and EPFL and then other universities abroad, is that here there's a lot of focus on having teamwork and doing projects, and that the projects are not pre-chewed, but they're often part of a research lab or something else, and that really allows you to explore certain topics as well as work with those people. And that builds a lot of trust. That's also how you, for example, the currency in academia is often recommendation letters. If you really work with people and impress them and solve problems for them, that can really be valuable to then build that network, so to say.
But it's not always possible to give value first on other people. Usually you're working on something and you need someone's help. And it takes quite a lot of time to build this truthful relationship with another person. So usually you need it right here, right now. Maybe you have some tips or bricks. What can we do in this situation?
Yeah. So in this situation, needing something right here, right now, you can also pay for people. That's how capitalism works. Like people offer their services often for work. However, in the ecosystem, there's also many people who want to pay it forward. So who have been there, done that, and they just want to help people, maybe avoid mistakes that they made, or they're generally happy to pay it forward. There's also the whole thing of advisors. So basically, people who advise startups or people in return for equity or stakes or even payments sometimes. So those are various options. There's also the thing you say, like, okay, maybe you're just building and you need something. Still, if you pitch to them whatever you're making and they're very interested, maybe they want to become an advisor, they want to become an investor, they want to join you in one way or another. At the end of the day, often we need people, their advice, to say what they would tell us. These days, we also have AI, which we can also ask a lot of things. So often you can bootstrap a lot of problems just asking your AI assistant. But then if you really need people to make certain introductions or other things, it's often valuable that you pitch, you explain whatever you're trying to achieve. And often there's many people in the ecosystem that are much more willing to help you than you would think. And under much more, let's say, less transactional or less consulting fee style approaches. For maybe an unexpected example are some of the law firms out there. Often law firms are very much like, we bill by the hour, but there's some law firms in the startup environment who really go more on a journey with the startup, and they say, okay, we do the work with you, and as soon as you raise the first round, then we become you have to pay us or something. I think that's usually valuable, and that really closes the gap of some companies or some projects not being started. And I also see the opportunity there, for example, for all the clubs, right? ETH Entrepreneur Club, also other clubs. They can really be more of a peer learning community where you have others sharing. And I think that's very valuable.
Before you mentioned an expression or a phrase that networking is a repetition of expectation. I really liked it. It resonates deeply with me, but maybe can you explain it in more details for people listening to us?
Yeah, so this repetition of expectations, basically it's all about reliability. So basically the best networkers aren't the most charming necessarily, but they are usually the most reliable. So basically, you can really depend on them. Otherwise, if you ask them something and they don't do it, I mean, assuming that they agree to doing it, that's really valuable. And basically all this reliability, so basically getting things done, building, shipping, doing certain things, that really compounds into a reputation. And this reputation really is an aura that you have that also, it's almost like word of mouth. So basically people will tell, oh, I worked with this person, or I got advice from that person, and that really worked out for me. And then other people will know about you. And I feel this sometimes a bit as well. And that's really what really enables it to scale. And also this reputation is the only career asset that follows you everywhere, like across jobs, across countries, across industries.
Arnout, thank you for being with us today. It was a lot of new and insightful things that we have discussed. So thank you a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and thanks the ETH Entrepreneur Club for the invite. It's super exciting to see what you're working on and creating, and I can't wait to see what you build next.